Bright and early. We got the early slot this morning. Well, first off, before we kind of record, let me thank you all for coming. I know it's an imposition, but it's important. The overall backdrop. Let me just say a couple words. Overall backdrop, then we'll take questions. And I just said something to the effect just as I was walking in. Big picture. The threats are changing rapidly. The threats that face Canada, the threats that face the alliance, evolution of the technical threats, if I can put it that way, from hypersonic missiles to autonomous warfare, hybrid warfare, the adversaries, Russia as a direct adversary. So that evolution is there. There's a process of shifting burdens. We've known about that, shifting burdens towards within the alliance, away from the United States. United States still in the alliance without question, but shifting towards Europe and Canada, and those burdens being picked up. And the capacities are being built, and you've seen recent announcements. There's more announcements today from Canada in terms of our procurement, building capacity, across maritime capacity with the sub announcement, light vehicles, munitions, the aircraft announcement, which we've now seen endorsed by NATO with the Global Eye, and that puts us in a position. Last point, and then we'll go to questions. The way we see things is a NATO that is moving towards burden shifting, more regional integration within a NATO umbrella. And so, par rapport le Canada, et c'est l'Arctique, c'est la responsabilité de l'Amérique du Nord, et puis en effet une crescent de l'Arctique juste du mer du Baltique. OK.
Concernant, M. Carney,
oui.
la Banque de la Défense, il
oui.
semble y avoir des discussions avec la Grande-Bretagne. Est-ce qu'il pourrait y avoir une sorte de fusion avec l'initiative britannique là-dessus?
J'ai eu une discussion hier soir avec M. le Premier ministre Starmer. Il y a des discussions tout le temps. J'ai eu une discussion il y a quelques semaines avec M. Brown, l'envoi spécial pour le Royaume-Uni. Des initiatives, selon nous, ils sont complémentaires. Parce qu'il y a une banque qui donne des prêts, des investissements. C'est l'initiative du Canada et 8 autres pays à ce moment-ci. Et c'est plus une initiative d'approvisionnement du Royaume-Uni. Mais on peut voir les concordances entre les deux. Parce que si on a l'approvisionnement prévisible, c'est plus facile de financer des petites et moyennes entreprises, par exemple. Alors, il y a des discussions. Je suis sûr que les discussions vont intensifier sur cela, parce que c'est une alliance, au fond. In English, I'll shorten it. Complementarities between the two initiatives. The MDM, the initiative of the United Kingdom, is pretty much a procurement initiative, sovereign procurement. There's an obvious complementarity between that and a bank, which is what the DSRB is. If you have more predictable procurement, it's easier to finance against it. I mentioned that I spoke with Prime Minister Starmer about it last night. There's been discussions amongst our officials. I'm sure those will pick up. It's an alliance after all, and we're all looking for the best ways to move forward as these capacities build up.
The Secretary General said coming into this meeting that he would like to see from alliance members a clear and credible plan towards 5%. So did we present a comprehensive plan to NATO? At the same time, the C.D. Howe Institute has also said that Canada needs to be fiscally transparent about how it's spending defense dollars. And so publicly, can you say what our plan is for 5%?
Well, the first thing is, and this is what the public needs to know, is that the commitment at NATO is 5% 2035, so it's 9 years from now. First point. Second point, in a world where threats are evolving rapidly and burdens are shifting, what is also was agreed at the Hague Summit is that those objectives, those percentages, will be reviewed in 2030. Okay, so those two things are part of the overall environment. That's sensible, and Canadians expect us to be sensible. We have a need to increase our defense spending, increase our resilience spending to protect Canadians first and foremost, and to support our allies. And we have some catch-up to do, without question. I came into government, we were spending 1.4% of GDP on defense, direct defense expenditure. We got that to 2% in the first time since the fall of the Berlin Wall. That's going to scale up to 2.5% over the fiscal framework over the course of the next 4 years. And in addition, we're spending 1.5% of GDP around resilience. So by the NATO definition, before the end of this decade, we are spending 4%. I'll remind, the 5% is out there. What's important, what people care about is, I mean, yes, the bond market cares about and being responsible with taxpayer dollars, that's fundamental. But what matters is those capacities. What are we actually spending the money on? The first thing we spent money on was paying the women and men in the Canadian Armed Forces properly. Payments that match the weight of their responsibilities. In terms of fiscal transparency, I'm conscious of other questions, and we can go into this in more detail. I'm perfectly happy to. We have provision, for example, for the submarines, already provisioned for that within that fiscal track. So the decision that was announced yesterday, contract still to be negotiated, but the decision was out 2 days ago, apologize, that will not have an impact on the budget, because the money has already been set aside for that. We will lay out in the budget an update with the decisions we're taking, where the fiscal track is, where the defense spending is, how we're spending the 1.5% on defense-related expenditures, resilience expenditures, and that's the right time to do it.
On burden shifting,
yeah,
sir.
sure.
Yesterday, Secretary General Rutte announced big new capabilities for NATO: airlift, refueling,
yep,
area surveillance. But when President Trump arrived, all he talked about was the refusal of the allies to participate in the attack on Iran. Is there a mismatch between alliance leaders who want to talk about what NATO can do and a president who's fixated on what NATO won't do?
The alliance is a defensive alliance. It's not an offensive alliance. And in a world of evolving threats, it's important that we, as your question suggests, that we put ourselves in a position where we can defend our citizens. And that defense, that robust defense, has to be highly, highly credible to deter attacks and prevent the type of suffering we're seeing in Ukraine. Is there more to do in order to be in that position? Without question. And what Canada looks to in these meetings, and all related meetings and interactions, is to identify where those gaps are and help to close them, and to do so in a transparent way. And that's a process. That's an iterative process. Yes, the President of the United States had a desire for more offensive support with respect to the Iran conflict, and it wasn't a direct ask of Canada. We didn't have the capabilities. We're not relevant from a base perspective in that theater, and that's between him and specific NATO allies.
On the submarines,
yeah,
you've said that the economic benefits were a major part of the decision-making process. What was it that clinched it for the winning preferred bidder?
Yeah.
And is there a consolation prize for the prospective loser? They want to sell all kinds of things, land vehicles, etc.
Well, the first thing is that the process was run by the Defense Investment Agency. So there's a series of criteria that are there. Obviously, cost is a component of it. Both bidders, as you know, I think, had met the operational thresholds of the Royal Canadian Navy. So both were, seaworthy from their perspective, or would perform the job. One of the, there's a set of related issues, though, such as sustainment. So how do we make sure that these subs are available for decades? Where does that sustainment take place? How is that expertise transferred from the bidders to Canadians and Canadian businesses, so that Canada is doing the sustainment? There's associated industrial and technical benefits that came with both of the bids, which were evaluated. So it was a series of criteria and matched or assessed on a pairs basis. If you were allocating a score of 10, who do you give it? The 7-2 and the 3-2. That's effectively the process that the DIA takes. To the second part of your question, we have a deep strategic relationship with the Republic of Korea. I had a very productive conversation with President Lee on the weekend to inform him of the decision. Obviously, he was disappointed, but the conversation immediately pivoted at his initiative to a series of issues around AI and technology risks and how we can continue and deepen our cooperation there. We picked up on that conversation. We had a long bilateral here yesterday. That's not a consolation prize. That is allies working together strategically on important issues. There's just a host of other issues where we're going to work with Korea and build out and continue to do
Is
so.
Tom Pitfield's appointment to the Senate a reward for helping you win the election?
Absolutely not. Tom Pitfield is an entrepreneur. He's a philanthropist. He's got deep technological knowledge about technology, and particularly with respect to the last aspect, it's we look at the Senate as a whole and what the competencies are, and obviously familiarity with government, familiar with legislative processes, other things are helpful, but we want some core competencies in there as well, and where the Senate is more deficient and there's people who are willing to serve, I'm very pleased that they are.
Could you explain the mechanism
You
for?
called Iran irresponsible just moments ago.
It is irresponsible. They were. Sorry, I'll let you finish your question. Sorry. Yeah.
What do you make of the U.S. strikes yesterday, and do you think the peace deal is threatened?
Well,
Si vous pouvez répondre en français.
en français. Ok, merci. Ok. C'est une situation avec. On commence en français. C'est une situation avec un cessez-le-feu. Okay? Il y a un cessez-le-feu. C'est pas parfait, mais ça existe. Il y a et le cessez-le-feu a été renforcé par le président des États-Unis pendant le funéral de l'ancien chef de l'Iran pour 6 jours. Et pendant cette période de deuil, où l'Iran est en deuil, l'Iran a attaqué le Qatar et l'Arabie saoudite plusieurs fois. Ça, c'est irresponsable. C'est pas correct du tout, mais ça c'est irresponsable. Alors, il y avait une réponse des États-Unis et c'est pas joli, mais c'est correct. Alors, oui, la situation est fragile. Le Canada veut que tous les pays impliqués vont renforcer, vont réinstiller le cessez-le-feu. In English, if I may, this is a situation where we had a ceasefire as part of the peace deal that had been reinforced by the U.S. President during the 6-day period of mourning for the late Ayatollah Khamenei. And during that period, Iran attacked multiple times. They would call targets, we would call infrastructure assets in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and threatened shipping again. That's irresponsible. It's not right, and the United States has responded as appropriate to look to stop this behavior and put in place at least conditions to reestablish the ceasefire. So, as I said in French, it's evidently a fragile situation.
You talked to Trump on Sunday?
I did,
Sunday,
yes.
You said he was in a good mood. He didn't sound like he was in a good mood. Is this that?
He was in a good mood at dinner last night as well.
Okay, so
I mean, I'm
publicly
not
he
his.
comes and he says, right, come on, I'm going to pull out. Or is this performative from your perspective? I'm not asking you to criticize him, but the public sees two very different things, and then you say he's in a good mood and all's fine with the spending.
Well, you added
Yes,
you did. So I'm going to call you on that. Look, I think the president, as did President Obama, which I just said to someone else, is looking for a shift of the burden within NATO. That's appropriate. That is happening. That's gaining momentum. That's part of the point I made to President Trump when we spoke a few days ago, is that it's not just he's winning the argument, he's won the argument. Countries recognize that they need to take more responsibility, see the direct threats. Now, the question for NATO, and part of what we will discuss and part of the point I will make in the room with my 3.5 minutes of time, so which is about a quarter of the length of my normal answer, I know, so I apologize, is that those shifting burdens are going to be, in our view, most effectively done, obviously with greater capacity. We have to spend more, we have to build these capacities, that's what we're doing, but in ways that recognize the regions in which we operate. So for Canada, North America, obviously, up until now, NATO has said, well, North American security, that's your problem. Well, North American security, and particularly Arctic security, and remind everybody that we've got 15% of the world's coastline. Arctic security is not a flank; it's a front. With the shift in the threats, and Russia is a direct adversary. So spending there and coordinating, not just Canada, but Canada, the Nordics, Canada, Germany, Canada, France, Canada, the Baltics, that crescent is vital for NATO. So that's where the discussion, in our judgment, needs to go, and that is where the planning is going, in our view.
We'll do a last question.
Yeah.
Just for the non-bankers among us, would you explain
Things like that.
Could you explain how the
Yep.
bank would make purchases, big-ticket items like submarines in the future, cheaper for the Canadian taxpayer? And is it able to do that as currently constituted, or does it need to grow further and get new members?
Well, I think so. First thing is you look at the membership of the bank. Let me give a specific example, which I think answers both parts of your question. And let's look at Ukraine, which is one of the countries that would be a founding member of the bank. I think everybody knows, and it's increasingly understood with a greater degree of specificity, granularity, is that in tragic circumstances, this war since 2014, Ukraine has made tremendous advances in drones and autonomous warfare, in the integration of those capabilities. That is relevant for everybody. Okay, they have expertise, they have production capabilities, and we are in the process, Canada included, of partnering with Ukrainian firms, Canadian firms and Ukrainian firms partnering and building up that capacity. Now, that in and of itself creates a supply chain. I've got a firm in Ukraine, maybe several firms in Ukraine, a firm in Canada, maybe somebody in the Nordics as well, and the ability to finance across that supply chain cost effectively is tremendously valuable. It lowers the cost of it for everybody. Us partnering with Ukraine not just brings technology, but it's cheaper even in a war theater to produce many things in Ukraine because of just volumes and other factors. That also saves money for Canadian taxpayers. And what it does as well, and maybe I should end on this since we're at the NATO Summit, it also pulls, tightens the alliance. It's another mechanism that builds the alliance together. And I think if I can just make one adjacent point, and this goes to taxpayers, what we don't want to do is to all build up in silos. That's very, very expensive. It's not a true alliance. It can be human nature to do that, say, okay, we need this capability. And so what Canada's been focused on is, and this, you've heard us say this many, many times, working with like-minded partners so that we exploit those complementarities, and I mean exploit in a positive sense, and that's part of what we're seeing. We see it with the GlobalEye aircraft. We're seeing it in how we will build out the submarines with the TKMS bid.
Did you talk about trade with the president?
I talked about this.
No trade?
I talked about this. Thank you.